All right, and we're back after our break. So I think we're just going into intake at the
Yep.
Claro session.
Yep.
Vera?
Yep. So on page 262, you have our intake sheet. And that's what we mentioned earlier about gathering the information that people may question why we get some of it. The top portion is the statistical information for the actual visitors that I mentioned earlier. We ask for their income just to have an idea of income range. A lot of times people say, something is for low income people, or this problem only exists for low income population. And with financial problems, that's not true. That's why we don't have, at the Western New York Law Center for our foreclosures, we don't have income restrictions, because if you're in foreclosure, it doesn't matter if you are below poverty or if you have, a $500,000 house. You're having financial difficulties, you're on the same plane. And then the bottom portion of this is completed either by an attorney or law student. Now, this is where that only applies if somebody comes in with an actual case. So if it's somebody who was served and is coming for an answer, or if it's somebody who wants to vacate a judgment. And the reason why we collect this information is actually the same what Jim talked about with sewer service, and to sort of see trends. Is there one plaintiff that files a huge number of lawsuits in Buffalo City Court, and what does that tell us? Or is there a process server agency that files primarily nail and mail affidavits of service? So we want to be able to see patterns like that, and that's why we collect this data. By the way, the intake paralegal does the top portion. So usually people may ask you why that happened, but usually those questions are taken care of before the visitor gets to you. Then we have the attorney form, and this is really something that the attorney fills out, and just to say what kind of help they provide, or you provided, to the visitor. So the types of assistance that we provide it's always, I feel like, general advice, because when somebody comes up to you and you ask them what they're there for, you're going to give them general advice whether you want it or not. And then we do a lot of answers. We do a lot of motions to vacate as orders to show cause. Not so much discovery, although we've had some summary judgment motions, or responses to summary judgment motions, rather. And we see a lot of people who need something as easy as, an FDCPA letter or a debt validation letter, or something along those lines. We have forms for all of this. And as Lauren mentioned, we have some laptops. If you would prefer to come in with your own laptop, we have all of those forms available online. We would give you the location of the website and username, password information.
Can I interrupt? If you have a laptop, it helps us out now that we're expanding the number of people at the Claro site through the addition of volunteer attorneys. If you can bring your laptop, that's a big help to us. We have Claro flash drives, so nothing should remain on your computer. It should all be downloaded to the Claro flash drive, and so if you have one, please bring it.
And the reason we do that is confidentiality, what Lauren talked about before. Even though you're preparing pleadings that will be filed and will become part of publicly somewhat available record, it just makes everybody sleep better if we do it that way. So I think Brooke is going to talk a little bit about actual interaction with Claro visitors, and then I'll go into more detail on the actual things that we do. Yes?
So for this project, there are no income or resource limits.
So the question is whether there are any income or resource limits for the project. The answer as of right now is no. It's just literally open door. Whoever walks through that open door, we help them. What we have noticed is that it's primarily people who are below poverty line or are at that level. We haven't really seen anybody come in with a steady stream of income who would actually be able to afford an attorney. As part of the project, we can also refer people out. I think Lauren mentioned referring people out to the Western New York Law Center for more complex cases, but in the future, there's no reason why we can't, refer people to private attorneys for some services. Obviously, other legal agencies in the area, depending on what they need. If we think that the best solution for somebody because they just came in with 10 judgments is a bankruptcy, that's not something that we do as part of the project. We would refer them out, so we would just build our referral list over time and absolutely work with
Yeah.
others.
We just want to add to that. At the Western New York Law Center, we do have 2 attorneys who are working on bankruptcies, but we have very limited guidelines, the types of bankruptcy cases that we can file. So I know that we have referred people there. So for example, I worked with a Claro visitor who had a workers' comp settlement, a substantial settlement, and he's on Social Security disability prospectively. And so he has the money to go to an attorney and pay for my guess would be it would be a Chapter 7 bankruptcy, and it didn't really fall within our guidelines. So so yes, we make those referrals out. But I agree with Vera. Most people I've seen are on certainly fixed incomes, low fixed incomes.
We also mention to people if they have potential FDCPA claims or any causes of action, we do let them know that that's the case and tell them that they could seek private attorneys who would represent them on those cases.
Yeah, because it's important to understand that the bulk of the work that we do in the Claro project is really working with consumer credit defendants, okay, not plaintiffs.
Hi, everyone. I'm Brooke, and as Lauren mentioned earlier, I work at the Buffalo Federation of Neighborhood Centers Hope Center. Quickly, a little bit, I think, about the BFNC. I would be hard-pressed not to talk about the wonderful job I have. But BFNC has been around for a really long time in the community. Our oldest house, the Westminster House, which a lot of people know about who are from Buffalo, dates back to the 1800s. We are an agency founded in the settlement house model, which is a community-based model. And we are a unique agency. 90% mental health is a lot of our work, and then the other percent is probably the work that I engage in, which is financial literacy, financial education, and at our one-stop center, which is the Hope Center, which opened in 2008. The model called the Pathway to Prosperity, and the idea behind that is that people can access a full range of services at any given area that they need. So we partner with other organizations already providing the services in Buffalo to provide them at our location, which is in the Tri-Main Center. So like we talked about, it ranges between financial literacy, free tax preparation, one-on-one financial counseling, financial education workshops, and other things of that nature.
We do some case management too.
And we do case management as well. So part of, I think sometimes what we wonder about, right, is what will it look like when we work with a Claro visitor? Because it might look different from what you're doing in your everyday work or your daily, day-to-day. Partially because this is limited in scope in the work that we're doing, and also partially because we may be working with clients that are different or visitors that are different from, who we're used to working with on a daily basis. So what we find often, and I'm not necessarily going to read off the slide, but work from it, people who are coming in to the Claro session, you very well might be the first person that they're talking to about their financial issue or their debt issue. So sometimes we forget about that. Sometimes we forget that they may not have told their story yet. It's not every day that we are standing in the middle of the street saying, I have debt issues, I'm gonna need help with this. So rarely are we kind of reaching out for support. Oftentimes people aren't even reaching out in their usual network of people that they know and talking about their financial issues. So you very well might be the first person. So above all else, I think really being able to listen. We may feel that their story may not necessarily be entirely relevant all the time to what we are talking about here, right? Everybody has lots of other things going on in their life that impact the way that they interact with you, and not only impact the way that they are handling their financial situation, but also it's really important that we kind of remain that constant, compassionate person who can really just listen. If this is the first time they're telling their story, let the person tell their story. It's an opportunity for you to learn more, not only about that individual, because you very well might see that person again, but also you could get information about what's going on with their specific case that you may not have had access to, or you may not have otherwise, thought to ask that person if we just give them an opportunity to speak. It also, given that this is kind of a really close encounter and a shorter kind of an interaction that we're having with people, it really having someone, being able to sit down and talk to you about what they are going through also really can give us the opportunity to help someone engage in the work. So, I think Lauren and Vera both touched on this earlier, how the legal process and often, what goes on behind the scenes as lawyers, most people are not aware of what's going on, and the work that goes into, helping someone with their legal issues, oftentimes we don't see a lot of that work. So from that end, this is an opportunity, like Vera mentioned, for someone to really engage in that process and to really see not only the work that's going into it on the part of the lawyer, but also their responsibility as a consumer and their options as a debtor defendant. So some tips that can kind of be really useful, I would recommend in the Claro sessions sitting next to someone rather than sitting across from someone. Because these are limited sessions in scope, and depending on, I think, where you're working or where you're volunteering your time, at the Tri-Main Center, I can speak from that. It's fairly easy to sit next to someone in our space. What that can do, though, is make someone very much just feel at ease. I think many people who are accessing services or need help are very used to sitting across from someone rather than next to someone. And if we're really looking to engage people in the process and understand their rights as consumers and understand that they will be representing themselves once they leave the door, that it's important that they be a part of that process. So anything we can do to make them feel more at ease or more comfortable with that process would be, I think, to our benefit and to their benefit as well. So really starting off by introducing yourself. I think often we kind of very, very much are like, okay, let's get down to work. We only have this amount of time. This is what we need to accomplish. But as Lauren mentioned, people have a lot of questions, not only about why are you asking me these questions, but also who are you and how can you help me and what are your qualifications to be able to help me. Most people won't necessarily question that, but they are probably a bit apprehensive. If this is the first time someone's talking about their story, or in general, people experiencing financial struggles, as Vera mentioned, this can happen to anyone. There is obviously, as things progress, so as someone goes deeper and deeper into debt, there is a bit of psychological disconnection from your financial situation that can happen. So at times, you may find someone seems like they're withholding information or doesn't know a lot of information. It can be very frustrating on your part or your end, because I think our natural response to many situations is how do you not really know what's going on? But as Matthew mentioned, we're working with people who very well may have been preyed upon by other predatory lending practices. And so they receive this letter in the mail, they have no idea how it relates to them or their life, and they throw it right in the garbage. We may also be working with people who haven't opened their mail in a few months, all of their mail. So there's kind of both ends of the spectrum there, and I think that we really need to be respectful of that person's process and that situation. So in spite of our I would say, instinctual, response to be, kind of, why haven't you addressed this? Or how come this, it's just on your credit report and this is the first time you're learning about it? I think taking a step back, right, and just saying, okay, well, if this is the first time, this is how we can work with you and help you. It's important that we validate, that we, as someone is talking to us about what's going on in their life, that we believe what they're saying first and foremost, and that we really validate not only the feelings that they're having, because we will get a full range, and I'll talk about that in a second, but also really just acknowledging that this is a stressful situation, and that even if you haven't been repaying on your debt, or you can't repay on your debt, it doesn't make it any less stressful for you, and that, we will do our best to alleviate the stress in this particular area, but you very well might notice someone becomes either more engaged when they're with you, less engaged when they're with you. There is the kind of full gambit of emotion that can happen. And a lot of that is not only because a lot of people have a lot of other things going on in their life, on top of the fact that they may be struggling financially, in more than one area, right? So we're focusing on their debt situation, but they might be struggling with underemployment, unemployment, childcare issues. Lauren mentioned divorce or other things, right, that are impacting us financially that we don't always think about as part of
Can I interrupt?
what someone might be experiencing. Sure.
The very first day that we opened up Claro to Claro visitors, the first person I sat down with talked about, she said, two law students were meeting with her, and then the person with gray hair came over, and she burst into tears. As soon as I sat down, I thought, oh boy, what have I done? She burst into tears and she said, I'm so sorry, but all of this is going on. I barely got here from work, and I just found out that my 16-year-old daughter is pregnant. And so, that's the first thing she said to me. She didn't talk about her consumer issues. She told me she just found out her 16-year-old daughter was pregnant. And so I've had a lot of Claro visitors cry. So we're trying to prepare you for what is likely.
We have tissues on hand. It's always helpful. So, yeah, Lauren raised a really great point that, like you and like me, other people, right, we all have other things going on in our life that not only affect our day-to-day, but also, right, where we're coming in to address this one issue that is also extremely stressful. And we may, upon sitting down, directly with the lawyer, say something like, I just found out my 16-year-old daughter was pregnant, right, which you're kind of like, okay, well, that really doesn't necessarily have to do with what we're going to talk about right now, but it's part of that person's life. It's part of what's going on in their life, and it's important that we at least acknowledge and validate that that is also stressful and that is also really hard. So not only connected to people's financial struggles or financial issues that they might be having, but in general, when someone is experiencing an issue in their life that might feel outside of themselves or out of their own control, there is, a level of embarrassment. There's fear associated with that. There are issues of shame. Oftentimes, I've come into contact with only, in the years I've been working, only one person that just had no desire to pay back any of their debt. And I've worked with hundreds of people. And so most people that I work with or that I've seen have very much an understanding that they are struggling in this one area, that they're struggling with their debt, that they created this debt, that there is a level of personal responsibility associated with that. But also, right, so there are those other things. I'm really embarrassed. I have no one that I can talk to about this. I can't talk to my spouse about this because we argue about it. That's, another high on the list. Or, I don't really have the means economically to pay back the debt, so what am I going to do? I'm going to forget about it, or I'm going to push it away, and I'm not really going to focus on that right now. thankfully, right, we have this project where people can come and get some answers and get some assistance and help that they might need. Some people get really angry, right? So if I'm struggling financially, on top of the fact that I might really have trouble making ends meet day to day, on top of the fact that not only this debt has kind of taken over, it has a tendency to really create some significant stress in someone's life, but also I might be just generally angry. So on our part, it's really important that we just maintain our confidence in the work that we're doing, maintain kind of a level of calmness, even if someone is getting angry with us. Validating their anger, again, is really important, like it's okay that they're angry. Because on some level they're being taken advantage of. On some level they're angry that they're in this situation on their own. There's a lot of, shame and guilt associated with that. And then I'll just talk lastly a little bit about some cultural competency. At the Hope Center, we work with a lot of different groups of people. It's really important that we acknowledge someone's culture and that we respect someone's culture and where they're coming from, and that we understand that race, ethnicity, culture, gender all play a role in how someone is not only responding to their situation, but also kind of the interaction of how someone's going to be working with us. So sometimes what can be really helpful is just asking, right? If we ever have a question about how we're engaging with someone and we're unsure if it's the right way, ask, because someone will most likely tell you, right? So if someone called me Brooke all the time and I prefer to be called Miss Densing, then, we may be like, well, how come this person's not giving me any information? I have no idea what to do about this. It very well could be something as simple as that. So just ask. I think often we don't think about that. Take a step back and just politely ask the person, how would you like to be referred to, or err on the safe side and refer to them as, Mrs. or Mr. And then if they, introduce themselves as someone otherwise, say, is it okay for me to call you Joe? And so, that can kind of really just give someone a general understanding and helps people to know that you're kind of on their side, on their team, and further engage in the work that you're going to be doing.
Okay, I wanted to, thank you, Brooke. I wanted to add to that, to state the obvious, it's very important that we don't judge the Claro visitor, and it's downstate. The Claro project has restrictions on the volunteer attorneys who may participate. And so those restrictions are downstate that if you represent creditors in your private practice, then thank you, but no thank you. We don't, I think it's a good fit for the Claro model. We've made a decision upstate to not implement that restriction. And really that's on at the suggestion of the Volunteer Lawyers Project. I said that some of their best lawyers of the morning for the housing eviction court are the people who also represent landlords. So people who represent creditors are welcome, but we did have one experience early on where someone who represents creditors and debtors. Vera, I don't want to paraphrase. So what did that attorney say that made us think it wasn't a good fit for the project? She was not a good fit for the project.
Well, she used to represent both, and I think she has since retired. But she said something along the lines of just, those people, and she referred to the debtors, and she kept saying that with, they don't have that many defenses, or they don't have, it wasn't necessarily what she said, it was how she said it.
And she said they sometimes tell the truth.
Your memory is better than mine.
So we chose not to invite that volunteer attorney to the project because we didn't think that that attorney would be would show the respect that we require at the Claro sessions. So does anybody have any questions about that? I mean, we're delighted to have people who represent creditors participate.
What is the conclusion conclude that there really is no defense, how do you assist the client, or however you call the person, to compromise the debt? That person doesn't have the real ability to talk to the other side. You really have to get in, don't you?
You have to
So-
repeat the question, okay?
So the question was, what if you conclude that there really is no defense? I think your best bet, right, is honesty. So I think what can be really helpful and part of engaging in this process is making sure that we are fairly transparent in the work that we're doing, especially because when people are leaving, they will be representing themselves. You know, I'm not necessarily going to touch on the legal side of it. I'm going to leave that to you guys.
Yeah.
But
we can
but
talk
you
about
know,
it.
from an interpersonal perspective, honesty is your honesty is best policy. I'm not going to cliche a term, but it really is. It's probably one of not only the easiest things to do, but also the most helpful. So if what you're finding is at the end of the day, there might be the end of the road, like you're just not really sure what the next steps are, or really finding out that this person might not fit into the Claro project. I think just being honest with someone.
I don't think people come to the Claro sessions with the idea of I'm coming to vacate a default judgment. They're coming to the Claro session